Yesterday, Rashi cited the Chazal, the Medrash. Why do we trace the lineage of Pinchas back to Aaron? Because initially there was a criticism because Eloz's wife was the daughter of Yisroel. So they attributed that his ability to kill Zimri was due to he had his grandfather, who was a person who had fattened calves for idolatry. So the Torah tells us his pedigree surpassed Zimri because he was Ben Aaron. His grandfather was Aaron, which was the most prestigious pedigree. However, Rameir Simcha Vince explains it this way. We find that in last week's reading, we'd read that when the Anei HaKavod, when the clouds of glory dispersed, what happened? We were attacked by Melech Arod, Melech Canaan. And the Jews made a commitment that if they win the war, they will give all their spoils to Hashem. When that happened, the Jews themselves, they appointed the leader and they said, we're going back to Egypt. Because we see we no longer have the divine protection, Rashi, in last week's parsha. And we find a battle happened to stop them. Elazar led that battle. He led that battle. And as a result of this, there were a number of families that were killed during this battle. And due to that, there were less Levium and there were less families. Now, we know that number-wise, the Levium were the smallest number of the Shvatim because they were not part of the Shibut. So you would think that if the Levium have to go and stop the Jews going back, it takes a tremendous amount of Mesiras Nefesh, sacrificed, but you put yourself in the position where you have greater numbers going back to stop it, you're putting your lives in jeopardy. But that didn't stop them. Elazar led the battle, and there were some families that were lost as a result of this. It didn't make a difference. There was what? There was Mesiras Nefesh. So the characteristic of putting your life in jeopardy for the sake of Kiddush Hashem, that characteristic we find by Elazar. As Jay mentioned yesterday, Chazal tell us, Pinchas, when he went to kill Zimri, he didn't believe he was coming out alive. Multiple miracles had to happen that he shouldn't be killed. And as the Medrash delineates, explains all the multiple miracles, how he was able to go in there, and when he was about to kill Zimri, why he wasn't killed, and how he impaled him, and all this, whatever happened. So the characteristic of giving your life, despite the chances of survival almost nil, that characteristic he inherited from Elazar's father. What happened with Aaron? Why did Aaron participate in Mechet Egel? So the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that when Aaron had saw that Hur, his nephew, was killed, he realized that if he tries to stop them, they're going to kill him. And Aaron is a Kohen and a Navi, and if they kill a Kohen and Navi, there is no kapora. The Jews will never be atoned for this. So he says, better I should participate in gathering the gold to head it off, although I may be putting my share in the world to come in jeopardy, but for the sake that Klal Yisrael should not be atoned, I'm willing to give up my Olam Haba for the sake of Klal Yisrael. That's why Aaron did what he did. And because what he did, although he didn't gather it for the sake of idolatry, it was purely a delay tactic, it was considered a sin. And he lost 2 sons because of this. That was the punishment. So that he was willing to put his Olam Haba on the line for Klal Yisrael, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, that characteristic we find by Pinchas. Why? Because it says, there's a pasuk in Tilim, and the Medrash tells us, we had mentioned that he had pierced them with a spear, both Zimri and Kozmi Basur, and he lifted them up, and the plague was ensuing. The plague didn't stop. And it says, "Vayifal Pinchas im Elokim." Pinchas took God like to would had a claim against Hashem. He took him to like the judgment. Why is the plague continuing? And he takes both of them and he slams them to the ground. And when he slammed it to the ground, the plague stopped. Do you know what? If you go and come against the Kodesh Baruch Hu with a claim, how are you doing this and that? You speak out of turn, you could forfeit your share in the world to come. But Pinchas was willing to put his Olam Haba on the line to speak seemingly out of turn for the sake of Klal. So where did he get that characteristic from? That he inherited from Aaron. So the reason why the Torah is tracing his pedigree to his father and to his grandfather was the two behavior patterns, the two characteristics we see displayed in Pinchas' behavior. One of them he inherited from his father, and the other characteristic he inherited from Aaron, his grandfather. That's the reason why the Torah is tracing his pedigree to his father and to his grandfather. That's the Merameus and Lubitvinsk. Now, there's a famous Siforno over here, which we have similar Siforno by Chet Egel. You realize the majority of Klal were not involved in Chet Egel. And yet, Klal was held culpable. So if they were not involved, why were they held culpable? So the Siforno over there explains by the Chet Egel, because when it was initiated, even though it was a small minority of the Jews were involved, how do you remain silent and watch the Schil Hashem after hearing the 10 Commandments, that idolatry is not permitted? How do you tolerate this? How did you allow it? So that the silence itself was the basis for their culpability. When Moshe had said, Mila Shem Eli, and the Levim were the smallest Shevet, went and killed idolatries, and Klal Yisrael remained silent, that was a kapora, that was an atonement for the silence when they had watched the idolatry take place. The shtika, the silence, and they did not intervene. They could have stopped the Levim from killing the idolaters, but they did not. They allowed the Kiddush Hashem to take place of the Mila Hashem Elai of the Levim. So the second silence was a kapora, was an atonement for the first silence. So the Sphira says the same thing here. Zimri is perpetrating the most extreme level of Chil Hashem. How did Klal watch this? Shimon was one tribe. The majority of Klal, they could have stopped this. How could they sit by and watch this happen? The silence is condoning the Chil Hashem. When Pinchas was an individual, and he pierced both Zimri and Cosby, and Klal, he did it. He did it before all the Jews, and nobody stopped him. So the second watching and not intervening to stop it, which was a correction on the Chil Hashem, that was atonement for the original shtika, for the original silence. Exactly the same thing. Take a look at the Siforno here. Bikanu is kinosi b'tochom. He avenged my vengeance in their midst. So he says, she'osa nikmosi l'eini kulam. And when they watch this and they don't intervene, that will be an atonement for their silence, for not intervening when the ones defiantly, they disgraced Hashem's name. And as a result of that, so Pinchas, when he killed them, betocham in the midst, was a public knowledge what he was doing. That act, he wanted to bring about a kapora, because as they remained silent initially, which was the ultimate Chil Hashem, this itself was a correction of Chil Hashem, similar to the Chet Egel, as the Siforno learns. What I'm saying, it says the Nisalmi min halacha, so Pinchas should be meritorious rather than Moshe Rabbeinu. That means all the Chil Hashem that was going on was Moshe Rabbeinu, was Nisalmi min halacha, because he forgot the halacha. Otherwise, he would have acted immediately and quelched it. But for the sake of the Kiddush Hashem that Pinchas brought about, that he shouldn't be meritorious, the Chil Hashem took place to the degree it did, so Pinchas should be meritorious. And Klal Yisrael should be atoned for the silence, and that was like a vindication. The original silence was, how do you condone this? Silence is always condoning. The answer is they remained silent when Pinchas went and killed Zimri, as we said. So I asked the question, if Hashem wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to go into Eretz Yisrael, he could have given the clarity that he should not strike the rock. So evidently Hashem did not want him to go in. So the Or Chaim HaKadosh explains why. So he explained that because anything Moshe Rabbeinu oversaw, was involved in, exists eternally, cannot be destroyed, cannot be taken by the enemy. The Mishkan itself was the collateral for Klal Yisroel. The Mishkan, it says by Mishkan, it says Mishkan twice, the Beis HaMikdash, the first and the second Beis HaMikdash were destroyed. Rather than destroying Klal Yisrael, Hashem took collateral. What was the collateral? The first Beis HaMikdash, second Beis HaMikdash. As the Navi says, that he expended his wrath on Leitzim Vavonim, rather than on Klal Yisrael. So because Hashem was able to take collateral, we had collateral to give. What was the collateral we gave? The first and second Beis HaMikdash. But if you don't have collateral to give, the credit that comes, it takes it out of the hide of the person. We would have had been destroyed. So Hashem did not give Moshe the clarity because Klal Yisrael would have been to be destroyed. This is the Or Chaim HaKadosh. Now, Rashi, at the end of Dvorim, when it cites Moshe Rabbeinu where he was buried Mul Balpor, opposite Balpor. The story with Zimri and Cosby and Pinchas, this was the Balpor. The Idalta al Balpor, together with what was going on. So over there, he cites the Medrash that once a year, Baal Pehor raises its head, comes out of the ground, and it's a level of prosecution. It's Klal Yisrael, where you cannot withstand that prosecution. But when it comes up and it sees the burial location of Moshe Rabbeinu counters that prosecution, and immediately it sinks right back in the ground. So what quells that prosecution is Moshe being buried opposite Baal Pehor. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to be buried there, because if he wouldn't have been buried there, Baal Pehor itself would be a prosecution. You couldn't silence the prosecution. So Hashem had Moshe Rabbeinu sin with the Chet Memorivo, didn't give him the clarity, but of course it was his choice. So he should have married going to Eretz Yisrael, so he should be buried there. Not the way the Or Chaim HaKadosh explains it. So let's talk. This Baal Pehor. Why was the Baal Pehor such a level of prosecution? Because the Jews sinned with Baal Pehor. But why were they able to sin to that degree? Because Moshe Rabbeinu had forgotten the halacha, because otherwise he would have quelched it immediately. And why was that? Why did the Chil Hashem take place to such a degree that even though the Jews weren't destroyed, but there's always that basis for prosecution? So Pinchas should be meritorious. So Pinchas should be meritorious. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu could not have that clarity, and therefore he struck the rock because he had to be buried opposite Baal Pehor. Hear this? The Chil Hashem happens because Moshe Rabbeinu forgets the halacha. And why does Moshe Rabbeinu forget the halacha? Because Pinchas has to be meritorious, that it should be his thing. It should be his day. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu can't go into Eretz Yisrael because he has to be buried opposite Baal Pehor. So when the prosecution happens once a year, he should quelch that prosecution. You know what's going on over here. But why is it so important? Pinchas should have this merit. He should be meritorious. Why? Now, who's the Mevaser? Elio is the Mevaser. He announces the coming of Mashiach. The Gemara says Pinchas is Elio Navi. Pinchas initially was a Levi, became a Kohen. Due to his active zealotry, well, he wasn't a Kohen because he was a son of Aaron. Elazar's father was a Kohen because it says they were Bnei Aaron. Pinchas was not because he was Ben Aaron. He was a Levi. He was born before Aaron became a Kohen. He became a Kohen because of this act of zealotry. Because of this act of zealotry, he's the one who merited, he's the Mevaser. He announces the coming Mashiach. Coming Mashiach is ultimately the Tikkun, is the world will be expunged of all evil. So Pinchas had to become the Kohen. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Pinchas to have this chus of doing the act of zealotry. Therefore, it was insolvent. Therefore, the halach was forgotten by Moshe Rabbeinu. So all the Chil Hashem was caused because Moshe Rabbeinu had forgotten the halacha. And why did Hashem allow Moshe Rabbeinu to forget the halacha? So Pinchas should be meritorious. And Moshe Rabbeinu, for that reason, couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael because now he has to counter the Balpor. So let it all not happen. The answer is no, because Pinchas has to be meritorious because Pinchas is Elio, and Pinchas is the one who's the one who has to announce the coming Mashiach. Here, the way all the dots have been connected.
Now it's a straight line, Rabbi.
The Kanus Kinosi. He dispelled my wrath from the base of Bekanus Kinosi, Betochom. So Rashi says, Benikmos Nikmosi, he avenged my vengeance. Bekatsu esaketzev shoyli litzos. He was enraged with the rage that I should have been enraged. Koloshin kino hu ha-mischare lintkom b'nikmas dover. It's where you're enraged, and the rage causes you to act in this zealous manner, to avenge because of that. Now, let's talk. We find that the Kohanim were always the Kanoim, right? Shimon v'Levi Achim. When Dinah was raped by Shem, who wiped out the community of Shem? Shimon and Levi. Correct? So Yaakov reprimanded them. What was the reprimand? That they wiped out the community? No, that wasn't. They deserve to be wiped out. He says, the timing is not good. You realize we're only a handful of people. We're surrounded by all these nations. We could be destroyed. The Medrash, only through miracles, Yaakov and his family went to battle against the nations of Canaan, according to one interpretation. Or Hashem brought up a miracle that there was a fear put on them that they did not react to this. But Hashem had to intervene that they could have been destroyed, Klal Yisroel, Yaakov and his family. Why? Due to their act of zealotry. Shimon and Levi. So when Yaakov said to them, how did you do it? He says, Nevola Nasis Yisroel. We could not tolerate this injustice that was done to us. If a person reaches a point you can't tolerate, the pain is so all-consuming, you can't tolerate it. That is the basis for the zealotry. You can't coexist with whatever that is. We find that Avraham Avinu went into the kiln. He went into the kiln not to bow to the idol. And that was Kiddush Hashem. Why did he go into the kiln? Because if I have to bow to the idol and behave as an idolater where I know the truth, I cannot live by doing an act which is to me is so unconscionable. I prefer to die rather than live that way. It's because of the level of understanding of how wrong it is, it's not worth living. That's why Avraham Avinu went into the kiln. Hashem says, if that is the basis for that, you're going to survive the kiln. That's why he merited the miracle. His brother Horan went into the kiln, but he went into the kiln as a man to come out of the kiln. The man who goes into the kiln to come out, you don't come out of the kiln. Hashem doesn't perform the miracle. Because it wasn't Horan couldn't tolerate being an idolater. He says, whatever Avram does, I do. Avram going in, he went in because he couldn't, if he would bow, he couldn't live. Life wasn't worth it. That's how deeply it was internalized into Avraham Avinu. Levi and Shimon, Levi was the Kanoi. He's the father of the Kohanim. He was the ultimate, he was a zealot. That was Levi. Mil Hashem Elai was an act of zealotry. That was the Levium. The smallest tribe. When Moshe Rabbeinu said Mil Hashem Elai, every Levi took a sword and did what he had to do. Although they were at risk of dying. Doesn't make a difference. That was the zealotry. When's the next act of zealotry? Pinchas. Pinchas is displaying the act of zealotry, the ultimate act of zealotry. And what's the next act of zealotry? The story of Hanukkah, the Chashmonoim, what we say in Dal Anisim, Ram Mapa'atim, Chaloshim Biat Giborim. The odds were endlessly overwhelming. It did not stop the Chashmonoim. Why? Because if to be able to watch this, the Chil Hashem that the Greeks are desecrating the Beis Hamikdash, idolatry, slaughtering pigs in the Beis Hamikdash, you can't tolerate it. I can't coexist with this going on. I will stop it, and even if it's at the cost of my life, it doesn't make a difference because it's not worth living. If that's what has to happen. The two things can't coexist. Therefore, they gave the life. But that's the internalization of the Kohen or the Levi. They have a capacity to relate to what Chil Hashem is that they cannot tolerate. This reality, what's going on. Therefore, the Chashmonoim, they went to war, but they're a handful of people. It doesn't make a difference. If we die, it doesn't make a difference. We will avenge Hashem's honor. That's always that. Pinchas was the ultimate display of this kanois. V'lo chilisi es bnei Yisroel. Bekanu Hashem attests he's bekanos kinosi. The wrath, the rage that I should have had, I would have had. And due to that rage, I would have destroyed Klal Yisrael because Pinchas himself displayed that rage because he cannot tolerate it. Therefore, I don't have to express it any longer. Therefore, he saved the day. I just want to make a differentiation based on what the Rameir Simcha said. Aaron, when he gathered the gold as a delay tactic, he put his Olam Haba on the line because he says, better I should forfeit my share in Olam Haba than Klal Yisrael should not be forgiven if they should kill me because I'm a Kohen Novi. It had nothing to do with his kanois, right? Aaron's participating in the krete was not kanois. Over here, Pinchas, when it says Vayefal Pinchas Lokim, when he had them on the spear, and the plague was still ensuing, he says to Hashem, "What are you doing? I've already done this. How do you let the plague go further?" When he said that, he spoke out of turn. Seemingly, it could have been seen, and if you speak out of turn, you forfeit your share in the world to come. But Pinchas didn't make a difference. Because Pinchas felt that the plague ensuing is the ultimate level of Chil Hashem. This is Chil Hashem. He's only saying it that it's rooted in the pain that he has of Chil Hashem. Therefore, that stopped the plague. When he slammed them on the ground after saying that, the Magefa stopped immediately. Because that was rooted in the depth of his pain of Kinos Kenosi, because that's the rage he's experiencing only because he cannot tolerate the Chil Hashem.
Rabbi.